Next up in the Heat Check Scouting Report series is bucket-getting guard Jeremiah Fears, who surprised as a one-and-done for Oklahoma this year after reclassifying. A 6'4" point guard, Fears was initially a 5-star prospect in the 25 high school class, but in reclassifying he was moved down to a 4-star, and somewhat fell off draft radars prior to this season, due to some experts thinking he likely wasn't ready to make the one-and-done jump. He quickly dispelled that notion with the Sooners in the SEC, averaging a white-hot 17.1 points, 4.1 assists and rebounds, and 1.6 steals per game while shooting 43% overall, 28% from 3, and 85% from the line. He's one of the youngest players in the entire class. He'll be 18 years old on draft night and still 4 months away from 19. Here's how Heat Check works. I'm going to identify one draft prospect and grade them on what I believe to be the most generally important skills and aspects of their game: athleticism, scoring, defense, passing and playmaking, and overall feel for the game. After those 5, I'll grade one additional skill relative to that prospect that I think is going to have the biggest effect on their stock. That will be deemed the swing skill. Each skill will be graded on the Heat Check chart, with ranges from freezing all the way to scorching. When that's all said and done, I'll divvy out one final overall score. Starting with Jeremiah Fears' athleticism, I've gone with the warm grade. I think he's a bit lacking in more traditional run and jump athleticism, but has enough of a new age punch to make up for it, and it's a compliment to his overall game. Fears stands at a compact 6'4" and lands a bit more on the slender side without immense length. His verticality, too, is lacking as he's mostly a below-the-rim athlete, but in a weird way, some of this works to his advantage as it allows him to be one of the more efficient movers in the class. Fears is a gear shifter, a swift guard with great change of pace, directional creativity, angular savviness, coordination, and elite body control. He's got what is likely the best pure first step, burst, and acceleration in the class, at least among lottery talents, and uses this unique combination of tools to fuel his production overall. He's got real speed, a start and stop, herky-jerky pace, and some work-in-progress decel in his toolkit. Ultimately, I think these things outweigh a lack of size, length, and verticality, and don't leave me too down on his athletic translation to the NBA. He has an exceptionally smooth feel to his game overall, and most simply, I think he just looks and moves like a pro out there. For Jeremiah Fears' scoring, I've gone with the hot grade. His combination of feel and tools made him a successful time bomb at the collegiate level, but there's plenty of refining for him to do to become a potent pro-level scorer. Across his 34 games, Fears averaged 17.1 points on 43% shooting, cashing in on 28% of his 4 threes attempted, and a very solid 85% of over 6 free throws attempted per game. He posted a 56% true shooting and an offensive box plus minus of 4.2. At his core, Fears is a creator, a dominant on-ball force who commands the rock with his combination of usable horizontal athleticism, superb handling, and some creativity in finishing and firing off smooth jumpers. And Porter Moser's system at Oklahoma agreed, giving him a 31.5% usage rate, the highest in the country among freshmen. Fears' game is predicated around generating paint touches, which he can do with consistency due to his aforementioned combination of ground-bound tools: speed, burst, first step, a gnarly handle, body control, and more. He scored over half his points on field goals at the rim, but did so on pretty mild efficiency once there, just 53%. That's not a necessarily strong number for a player who will be so reliant on getting to the paint, or at least wants the threat of it hanging over his game, and his low conversion rate in the paint points to numerous factors both solvable and unsolvable, such as below the rim athleticism, shot selection, no real adept finishing package, the tendency to get a little out of control, and probably most importantly, a lack of core strength, which allowed him to get bumped off his spots just a little too easily. In order for him to truly reach the heights of his game, improving his finishing is going to have to be the #1 priority. The good news is that Fears has little trouble actually getting to the rim, which is the hard part for most prospects, and he projects to have more offensive options outside of just rim finishing too. He's an adept pick and roll player, seeing the bulk of his usage there and converting a nice 41% of those shots. He was a transition nightmare, looking to get out and go and converting 58% of those, which usually ended up downhill. Perhaps the most tantalizing aspect of his game is featured in his isolation numbers. He ran 67 total attempts in isolation, pretty good volume, converting at a nice 36%, which the ISO-heavy NBA is sure to pick up on. So few players are able to truly create offense out of nothing, and Fears may very well have the best ISO tools in this entire draft class. The last thing we'll touch on is Fear's free throw rate, which is a staggering .52, made even better by the fact he converted a highly elite 85% of those shots. Despite the fact contact can somewhat throw his drives off, he certainly doesn't shy away from it, and the eye test backs up the fact he's very much cut from the same cloth as players able to take advantage of getting free chances. We'll jump more into Fear's outside game later in the video, but just know it's as much a work in progress as the first few levels. Simply put, the reason for Fear's hot grade, opposed to Scorching, is that he's just not elite yet at any singular thing, but rather has the bones of this really dominant on-ball scoring game waiting to be developed. For Fear's defense, I've gone with a cool grade. His physical tools don't aid him quite as much on this end of the court, and despite some ball hawking tendencies, this simply isn't going to be a major plus at the next level. On the year, Jeremiah Fears nabbed a really great 56 steals, good for 1.6 per game, turning plenty of those into easy transition offense for himself or teammates. He posted a solid steal percentage of 3.1 and finished with a defensive box plus minus of 1.7, not terrible for a lead guard of his stature. In sticking with some pluses, Fears has a real cornerback style to his defense, poking and prodding on ball, jumping lanes or batting down passes with anticipatory instincts in the open floor. In contrast to a player like Trey Johnson, who I covered in my last T-check, Fears self-generates a ton of his steals. And I don't think there's a lack of try or effort from Fears on defense. He's got really active hands, maintains a focus and awareness when defending off ball, and makes players pay more often than not for lazy or ill-advised passes. The main problem here is that his physical tools simply aren't built for defending at a high level. He's on the smaller side and will especially be that in the NBA, and while he's still got plenty of the horizontal side-to-side movement that can keep him in front of defenders, his lack of strength and physicality can lead to rough screen navigation or the ability for physical drivers to kind of go right through him. Surprisingly, he wasn't tested much at Oklahoma. The Sooners were able to keep him on the wing away from actions a shocking amount, but the fear is that NBA teams will be able to hammer him with ball screens or really physical handlers, and he won't be able to keep pace. If he were to bulk up some and really be able to contest at the point of attack with ball screens, I'd feel much better about his defensive floor, which again is somewhat on the table with Fears being so young and having so much time to grow into this frame and game. For Jeremiah Fears' passing and playmaking, I've gone with the hot grade. His scoring and passing games are somewhat conjoined in this really natural, creative blend where so many different things can happen. In a season with Oklahoma, Fears dished 140 total assists to 116 turnovers, good for 4.1 to 3.4 per game, and an assist to turnover ratio of 1.2. He had an assist rate just under 29%. For reference, usually if it hovers around 30%, it can be indicative of lead guard potential in the NBA, despite a pretty high turnover percentage of 18. And it feels worth mentioning again here that Fears had the highest usage of any freshman in the country. Much like his scoring game, Fears' passing is reliant on him getting paint touches, diving to the middle of the floor and quickly spraying out to open shooters, slashing cutters, or paint-rooted bigs after receiving a double team. Much like his offense, I feel really great about his consistency in breaking down that first line of defense, giving him premier collapse and spray potential. Fears has a nice feel for how his driving is affecting the floor, how the defense is shifting and reacting, and who he's drawing away. In the same way he's great at creating driving angles, he can do the same with passing angles, able to shift directions quickly to zip the ball wherever. Again, much like his scoring, Fears gets a ton of passing playmaking work in the pick and roll, where I don't think he had ideal partners, but still made the best of his situations there. His nearly 3.5 turnovers per game is, of course, concerning. I feel like it's a combination of his youth and inexperience, Oklahoma's general inconsistency, and the fact they didn't have a true rim runner, which I think would be a phenomenal weapon for Jeremiah Fears. I'm not even overly worried about the turnovers. It feels like one of a few things that can get ironed out with further development, a higher level supporting cast, and more ideal weapons, as well as NBA spacing. I think the reason I'm ultimately more reserved on Fears' passing game is that it's really simple and just doesn't quite set my spidey senses off. But the caveat here is that with his athletic style and ability to generate paint touches so easily, most of his situations don't call for crazy passing. While I don't think he has quite the same high-level aesthetic of some of the best passers in this class, does it really matter if he's making the right play? All things to consider as you form your own opinions on Fears. For Jeremiah Fears' unquantifiable feel for the game, I've gone with warm. I think there's a case to be made he's a high feel offensive player, and maybe even overall with his ability to generate steals, but I think some general inefficiencies, questionable shot taking, decision making, and a buku of turnovers lands me somewhere in the middle here. Fears can be polarizing on a near play-to-play basis in this category. He'll slash to the lane, direct himself with innately perfect footwork, and contort his body to hammer a jumper that lands true over an outstretched defender in good position. And then the very next play fire off a potentially ill-advised step back three from the parking lot with little resistance. One thing I do want to say though, much like other skills, feel for the game isn't set in stone. Players evolve, grow, the game slows down, which for certain players can lead to a jump to stardom. And I think this especially applies to Jeremiah Fears, who will be starting his NBA season at just 18 with a limitless career ahead of him. And as I've stated before, he's just got this pro look to him already. So while his college tape leads me to a warm grade here in the feel for the game department, mark me down as keeping a watchful eye on Jeremiah Fears and his increasingly high-octane game. For Fears' swing skill, I've gone with shooting. While everything about his profile absolutely screams that he's going to be an above average range shooter, he still just shot 28% from 3, making this a potentially murkier area than people might think. As mentioned, Fears shot 2% shy of 30 on the season, doing so on essentially 4 attempts per game. Similarly to most prospects, he was much better while stationary, converting 36 of 3-point catch and shoot shots, and a solid 39% of those while unguarded. The rougher stuff lies in his off the dribble work, which obviously he's doing all the time with that handle. He shot just 31% in total and 21% from beyond the arc. His handle and movement skills can consistently get him where he wants to go and in advantageous shooting positions, but he just didn't convert at the rate NBA decision makers probably would have liked. And this is especially paramount given his game as a whole is built around dive bombing the paint. If the defense knows that's his goal or that he won't convert from further out, even given just how great a horizontal athlete he is, it's going to make life tougher, especially since he's currently an average finisher. But again, there's several things working in his favor here. There's little, if anything, I change about his shooting motion. He's got a high release, very solid transfer of motion, he likes to rise high, and it's almost always smooth, results be damned. His free throw rate and subsequent conversion is pretty astounding, over 6 per game at the line and hitting 85% of those. If shooting around 70% at the line is a decent indicator of touch, 85% on high volume is 115-degree heat breaking the thermometer. And I think a really complex shot diet on non-rim two-pointers is potentially the biggest indicator he'll eventually be able to stretch out his game. He shot a blistering 46% of those on 98 total shots, a really great number on great volume. And this somewhat segues into the last point that again, Fears had this long leash on an up and down Oklahoma team that had little creation outside of him. So I think the level of difficulty on his threes as a whole somewhat hurts his numbers, even if he'll eventually be taking those down the line. Ultimately, I'm pretty bullish on Fears' long-term outcome as a shooter. I think he'll be able to capitalize on the easy stuff and eventually improve overall to become a tough shot taker from beyond the arc. The grade. I've given Jeremiah Fears a grade of 8.3. I think he's a highly skilled lead guard prospect with some unteachable traits that could be worth pouring into for any team in the top 10 at the 25 draft. Fears is probably a prospect you either feel really great about or pretty uneasy about, leading to a polarizing draft range that could go as high as the top 5 or as low as the middle of the first round. His game is one of the best cases I've seen of process over results, unteachable skill versus quantifiable impact. There's so many question marks surrounding his game. Will his finishing come around? Are the shooting flashes real? Will he make strides in passing playmaking? But if even a few of those take a leap, he could be bound for stardom, and his indicators across the board are pretty good. Ultimately, I lean pretty positively towards Fears' game. I think NBA spacing and potentially more rigid NBA coaching is set to boost it, and with how much his smoothness pops on film, it's hard not to bank on these things coming around somewhat given his age and just how much more room he has to grow. That's it for this one. Let me know what you think of Jeremiah Fears, what you grade him, where you draft him, and drop who you want to see in the next heat check. We'll see you next time.